My name is Nora, and I was 26 years old when I learned that love does not protect you from humiliation. I learned it in a white dress. I learned it at a table that was not mine. And I learned it from a man who had promised me forever approximately 45 minutes before he let his mother erase my family from our wedding reception. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because the truth is, the wedding should have never happened at all. And part of me knew it. Part of me always knew it. But when you grow up the way I did, watching your parents work double shifts, skip their own anniversaries, and drive a car that smelled like stale coffee and hope, you learn to ignore small warnings. You tell yourself that love is enough. You tell yourself that money doesn't matter. You lie. And then you stand at the entrance of a country club ballroom that your fiancé insisted on, and you realize the lie was never yours to begin with. Let me start at the beginning. I met James 4 years before the wedding. He was charming in that effortless way that rich children learn without trying. He held doors. He remembered my coffee order. He told me my smile looked like forgiveness, whatever that meant. I was 22, working 2 jobs and finishing my nursing degree at night. He was 25, working at his father's investment firm, and had never once worried about rent. We were not the same, but I loved him anyway. Or I loved the version of him that showed up when his family wasn't around. Because when his mother entered the room, James became someone else. His voice changed. His posture changed. He laughed at jokes that weren't funny and agreed with opinions he had argued against the night before. I noticed this. I told myself I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. His mother, Margaret, came from old money. The kind of old money that never says the word money. She wore cream-colored pantsuits and spoke in a register that made everything sound like a judgment. She never said a single cruel thing to me directly. She didn't have to. Cruelty, I have learned, is often just a series of small silences, tiny glances, and the way someone says, "Oh, how interesting," when you mention your mother manages a bakery. Margaret looked at my parents the same way she looked at the catering staff. Not hostile. Just dismissive. Like they were furniture that had been placed incorrectly. My parents, my father who drove a delivery truck for 30 years, my mother who still wears the same gold earrings she bought at a flea market in 1994, did not know how to respond to this. They smiled anyway. They always smiled. That was their curse. When James proposed, I almost said no. I had the ring in my hand, a small diamond, modest by his world standards, enormous by mine, and I almost handed it back. Because I could see it already. The wedding planning. The guest list. The moment when Margaret would suggest, gently, that perhaps my parents would feel more comfortable at a different table. But James looked at me with those eyes, the ones that only appeared when we were alone, and he said, "I don't care what my mother thinks. I love you." And I believed him. That was my second mistake. The first was accepting the ring. Planning the wedding took 8 months. 8 months of Margaret suggesting venues, Margaret approving the florist, Margaret explaining that certain traditions meant the groom's family should host the rehearsal dinner. 8 months of my parents nodding quietly, contributing what they could, my mother sewing small lavender sachets for the favors, my father practicing his father of the bride speech in the bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning because he couldn't sleep from the anxiety of it all. James promised me we would have a small table for our immediate families. Just parents. Just us. He promised my mother and father would sit beside his, equal and honored. I should have put it in writing. No, that is not fair. I should have listened to my body. The way my stomach clenched every time Margaret mentioned the seating chart. The way my hands went cold when James said, "Let my mom handle the logistics, she's good at this." The way my mother's voice sounded smaller and smaller on the phone as the date approached. My mother called me 3 days before the wedding. "Sweetheart," she said, "your father and I are just happy to be there. It doesn't matter where we sit." I should have asked what she meant by that. I did not. Because I was tired. Because I was stressed. Because I had spent 8 months telling myself that everything would be fine, that love would win, that Margaret's subtle maneuvering was just her way of showing care. I was wrong. The wedding ceremony happened in a garden. It was beautiful. Sunlight through oak trees, white roses, a string quartet playing something soft and forgettable. I walked down the aisle alone, my choice, not Margaret's, and I saw my parents in the third row. They were crying. My father held my mother's hand so tightly his knuckles went white. James waited for me at the altar. He looked handsome. He looked kind. He looked exactly like the man I wanted him to be. We said our vows. We exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. And then we walked back down the aisle together, and I whispered, I can't wait to see my parents' faces at dinner. James did not respond. I should have noticed that. The reception was held in the country club ballroom. Crystal chandeliers. White tablecloths that cost more than my first car. A champagne tower that Margaret had insisted upon because it photographs well. When I walked in, arm in arm with my new husband, I scanned the room for my parents. I looked at the head table first, long, draped in ivory linen, set with gold-rimmed plates. I saw Margaret. I saw James's father. I saw James's older brother and his wife. I saw his aunt from Connecticut. I did not see my mother or father. I looked again, and then I saw them. They were sitting at a small table in the back corner of the room, near the kitchen entrance. A table meant for overflow guests. A table with no centerpiece, no gold rims, no champagne flutes. My mother was holding my father's arm. She was smiling the same smile she had worn for 8 months, the one that said, I am fine. This is fine. Do not worry about me. And Margaret, standing near the head table, glanced at them and said, loud enough for the catering staff to hear, loud enough for me to hear, loud enough for God to hear. Oh dear. They really do look too poor to sit here, don't they? James did not flinch. James did not correct her. James looked at his mother, and then he looked at my parents in the corner, and he smiled. He actually smiled. And then he said, yeah, good call, Mom. The room did not stop. The string quartet kept playing. The waiters kept pouring champagne. The guests kept laughing and talking and taking photos of the chandeliers. But I stopped. I stood there in my white dress, holding the bouquet I had not yet thrown, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break. Crack. The way ice cracks on a frozen lake, thin and deep and spreading in directions you cannot yet see. I looked at my husband. He was already walking toward the head table, toward his mother, toward his family. He did not look back at me. He did not look back at my parents. And that is when I knew what I had to do. Stay with me, because what happened next did not just ruin a wedding. It ruined a name. It ruined a reputation. And it started with 3 words into a live microphone, in front of 300 people, while my mother-in-law smiled. I walked toward the stage. And I did not let anyone stop me. The stage had been set up for the father of the bride's speech. My father had practiced that speech for 6 weeks. He had written it on napkins, on receipts, on the back of a utility bill. He had called me at midnight to ask if a joke about delivery trucks was appropriate. He was terrified and proud and so full of love that it made my chest ache. But Margaret had moved the speeches to the end of the night. She said it would be more dramatic. She said the photographer preferred evening light. She said my father could wait. My father had agreed. Because that was what my family did. We agreed. We accommodated. We smiled while being moved to corners and told we looked poor and erased from tables where we belonged. Not anymore. The microphone stood on a silver stand near the cake. A 3-tiered cake that Margaret had chosen, almond with raspberry filling, because my favorite flavor was too common. I walked toward it slowly. My heels clicked on the marble floor. A few guests turned to look at me, curious why the bride was walking away from the head table. Margaret was already seated, laughing at something James's aunt said. James had his back to me. He was pouring himself champagne. I reached the microphone. I tapped it once. The feedback squealed through the ballroom. Conversations stuttered and stopped. 300 faces turned toward me. Margaret looked up confused. James turned around, glass in hand, eyes narrowing. And my mother, my sweet, quiet mother who had never asked for anything, sat up straighter in her corner chair. I saw her place her hand over my father's. I saw her nod, just once, as if she knew. I did not plan what happened next, but I had been planning it for 8 months without knowing. Good evening, I said into the microphone. My voice came out steady. I did not expect that. I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate our wedding. Margaret smiled. She thought this was a toast. I especially want to thank my mother-in-law, Margaret, for handling the seating chart. A few people clapped. Margaret inclined her head gracefully. She worked very hard on it, I continued. She decided who sat where. She decided which table had flowers and which table had none. She decided which family belonged near the front and which family belonged near the kitchen. The room went quiet. Margaret's smile faltered. My parents, I said, and my voice cracked on the word parents, are sitting in the back corner of this room. They are sitting near the kitchen because Margaret said, and I quote, they look too poor to sit here. Silence. Not a gentle silence. The kind of silence that sucks the air out of a room. I heard someone set down a fork. I heard ice melting in a glass. And my husband, I said, looking directly at James now, my husband heard his mother say that. And he smiled. And he agreed. James's face went white. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. So I want to make an announcement, I said. Since we are all here, since the champagne is flowing, since the photographer is capturing every moment for posterity. I took a breath. This marriage is not valid. Margaret stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor. Nora, do not. I signed a prenuptial agreement last week, I said, cutting her off. My voice was louder now. Not yelling. Just released. James insisted on it. His lawyer drafted it. 47 pages of clauses and subclauses about what I would not get if this marriage failed. I turned to face James fully. But you forgot something, James. You were so worried about your family's money that you forgot to check one thing. He shook his head. Nora, stop. Let's talk privately. I recorded you, I said. The room inhaled. I recorded you 3 months ago, when you were drunk at your bachelor party. You told your friends that you were only marrying me because your mother thought a humble wife would look good for the family image. You said you would keep me around for a few years, then trade me in for someone more appropriate. James's glass slipped from his fingers. Champagne splashed across the white tablecloth. I have the recording, I said. I have it saved in 3 different places. And I have already sent it to your father's business partners. Margaret made a sound, a small, wounded noise, like an animal caught in a trap. So this wedding, I said, this beautiful, expensive, humiliating wedding is over. The cake is almond. The flowers are out of season. And my parents are going home now. I stepped away from the microphone. And then I walked. I walked past the head table, past Margaret's frozen face, past James reaching for my arm. I walked past the guests who were already pulling out their phones, already whispering, already filming. I walked past the champagne tower and the crystal chandeliers and everything that was never mine. I walked to the corner table. My mother was crying. My father stood up and opened his arms. I fell into them. Let's go home, I whispered. And we did. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. James's family tried to fight the prenup, ironic, given that they had written it, but the recording made everything complicated. His father's business partners were uncomfortable. His mother stopped leaving the house for a while. I heard she blamed the caterer. James did not apologize. Not once. He sent his lawyer to do his talking, and his mother sent a letter demanding I return the engagement ring. I returned it in a padded envelope with no note. My parents moved closer to me after that. My mother retired from the bakery. My father bought a used sedan that smelled like coffee, just like the old one. We ate dinner together every Sunday. We never talked about the wedding unless someone made a joke about almond cake. I finished my nursing degree. I work nights now in a pediatric wing. The children do not care about my last name or my credit score or what my mother-in-law thought of my shoes. They just want someone to hold their hand when they are scared. I am good at holding hands. Sometimes I think about what I would say to James if I saw him again. But I never see him again. He moved to another state. He married someone else within a year, a woman whose family owns a car dealership. I hope she is okay. I hope she has someone who holds her hand. As for me, I am not angry anymore. That is the quiet truth. I spent so long being angry that I forgot what peace felt like. But peace is just this. A small apartment. A job that matters. Parents who love me. Sundays with pot roast and bad television, and no one telling anyone they look too poor. I won the moment I walked away from that microphone. Everything after that was just paperwork.